Today we're going to be talking about a Hunter Strand build for Onslaught that does, well, everything. And you're going to need it to when your LFG buddies aggro the Tormentor and the ADU for the 4th run in a row. It's got crazy ad clear, excellent ability uptime with supers nearly every wave, fantastic subclass and artifact synergy, and among other great features, it's pretty flexible. So you can customize it the way you want to, which we'll get into more later when we talk weapons. The key to any good build is defined goals. So I had to ask myself that first. What does a good build need to do in Onslaught? What are the challenges of Onslaught? And after getting wiped by a Tormentor and staring out the window for an hour, I've come to these 3 goals. Number 1, mass ad clear. The number of ads is larger than the DCV. You need abilities and weapons that's going to dispatch a large number of trash tier enemies quickly. If you don't, things are going to get out of hand pretty fast. Number 2 is single target damage. There are some chunky enemies in Onslaught, especially some of the shielded sky bombers. So you're going to need tools to deal with them. I'm talking brigs, tormentors, demolitionists that spawn right on your head, and even the little saboteurs are pretty chunky. So you gotta have options to take them out quick, otherwise you and your ADU are gonna get trashed. Number 3 is survivability. Neither of these 2 previous points I just mentioned matter at all if your build doesn't incorporate some element of survivability. Personally, I find it pretty difficult to defend the ADU when I'm dead. Having survivability in your build doesn't mean passive play either. Sometimes the best way to stay alive is just to kill everything, but Onslaught is on another level, and in the midst of the most chaotic moments, you need a couple extra elements to help you live, a little bit of spice in your build that's going to keep you alive. So I've included a few elements there. So those are the main issues of Onslaught to me. Mass ad clear, single target damage, and just surviving. And to be honest, most activities in the game are the same way. The difference with Onslaught, however, is the urgency. Typically in Grandmasters, you have a place you can go that's fairly safe. You can take your time. Onslaught forces your hand by demanding that you defend a zone. And that's where I think today's build can really help my hunters out there, because there's a lot going for it. Typically build videos kind of discuss the exotics and the weapons first, but since today's build is so balanced and pretty diverse, I want to tackle it by goals first and then kind of wrap it all together at the end and even mention some alternatives along the way. First goal is massive damage, second is survivability, and third is versatility. Onslaught has a few different combat environments, and it's very helpful to be flexible. And if you don't care about what I have to say at all, which is, I totally get it, I've got a dim link in the description for you. Just make sure to leave a like and subscribe for my next videos before you do. These take a lot of time. I appreciate it. The first goal of this build, as mentioned, is massive damage, and something that this build does pretty well. You need to spread it out when there's lots of ads, and then you gotta focus it when you have a skyscraper brig in front of you bombing the ADU. To accomplish ad clear, I've been using Tusk of the Boar, the Strand special grenade launcher from Iron Banner. I was lucky enough to get one, and I had no idea just how good it would be even at the time. Not only does it synergize nicely with fragments like Rebirth, which can drop threadlings on Strand kills, but you've also got 2 more months of artifact mods like Unraveling Orbs and Horde Shuttle. Unraveling Orbs grants unraveling rounds for around 7 seconds anytime you pick up an orb, and then Horde Shuttle allows you to spread more threadlings by damaging unraveled targets. So you can kind of see the synergy there already. It's very seamless, very effective. Even more so than Forbearance in my opinion. Forbearance is great, you got the Soul Drinker trait, restoring health, that's great, but overall the synergy just kind of isn't there. Ambitious Assassin chain reaction is very good, but at least this season with the artifact, there's just not a lot of synergy with Arc 3.0 to work with there. With Tusk of the Boar and the artifact mods, you're going to be able to spread unraveling really easy. That's going to spread damage to enemies close by, but then the threadlings that are generated are going to chase down the targets that are a little bit further away and didn't just get nuked by chain reaction. It's absolutely wild, and I've seen follow-up shots with Tusk of the Boar generate upwards of 5 threadlings, which really adds up a lot of damage. And that's literally it. That's really all you need for ad clear. Just Tusk of the Boar and these couple mods will do it, which is fantastic, because that leaves you room to experiment with other weapons in your loadout, which we'll discuss momentarily. Now, we'll talk about the rest of the fragments shortly, but the one fragment I see is pretty interchangeable is Thread of Continuity, which just extends the Strand debuffs that you deal. I like using it to extend the unraveling I deal to enemies, but also severing. Hunter's Threaded Spike is a really handy option to just quickly reduce the amount of damage a boss can deal, and extending that duration is never gonna hurt. Usually I like to sever the giant Sky Bomber brigs, or anytime a Tormentor spawns in, any little edge to help you survive that chaos can make the difference in your run. And another thing I like about continuity is that it makes suspending targets a little more worth it. Extends that duration. I just think it's too short without it. In Onslaught for this build, I typically just use grapple so I can get around quickly, but using a shackle grenade for an emergency suspend can be very helpful as well. Now back to unraveling orbs, since that's a pretty pivotal part of the build. How are we generating those? I like to run Reaper on my class item, so dodging will generate an orb once I get a kill, and then a siphon mod, so multi-kills will grant orbs. Between those two things, you're completely set for just about constant uptime on unraveling rounds. And you're going to see as we move through the build that orbs are a very common factor, and each layer is just made better and better by orbs of power, which leads right to my next facet of the damage discussion, which is single target damage. Demolitionists, tormentors, and especially those McDonald's looking shanks can be kind of tough, and this is where our exotic can help out. We're going to be taking advantage of Star Eater scales for a couple of reasons. First one is super uptime, second is damage. First off, you're generating orbs like crazy, so are your allies, and since Star Eater scales juices up the amount of energy you get from each orb, your super also returns very quickly. It's quite nice. I wouldn't say it's quite on the level of Shards of Galanor or Orpheus Rig, but don't count it out. If your teammates are generating a lot of orbs, it can be pretty close. Then of course you can overcharge Star Eater scales to give your super a significant damage boost. Against Carl here, you can see that Silk Strike light attack deals 93,327 damage, which right out of the gate, pretty good amount of damage. However, if you combine Silk Strike with Feast of Light times 4, you get a whopping 158,503 damage per strike, which is roughly 58 more damage for your super. That amount of damage is a fantastic asset when you have Demolitionists spawning right on top of your ADU. If you gotta panic pop your super just to survive and clear some extra adds, you can even do substantial damage to Tormentors. You just kinda gotta do a dance right. You gotta land a few hits and then dodge out of there before they suppress you. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Once we discuss my choice of weapons, you'll see just how easy it is to max out and overcharge your super. The raw damage you can output with a Star Eater super is really helpful in chaotic Onslaught matches, and it's why I didn't choose to use that helmet. We'll be getting Woven Mail often enough, as you'll see though, and I thought Star Eater offered a lot more utility. And real quick, if you're enjoying the video, feel free to subscribe for more and leave a like to give this one a boost. Thanks. Now the last thing I wanted to talk about in terms of damage is the Whirling Maelstrom aspect, and this is also where the build starts to overlap into survivability as well. Whirling Maelstrom, as I'm sure many of you are familiar by now, creates a tangle buddy when you throw or destroy a tangle, and then that buddy will seek out nearby enemies and just slap them around and deal a bunch of damage. It's just another layer of free damage. It's great. I find it really helpful to throw into the ADU if enemies are there, especially if it's the invisible vandals. Sometimes they're kind of hard to locate. Helps me find them, clears out targets a little bit quicker. Now the great thing is, because of unraveling orbs and how easy it is to spread unraveling with Tusk of the Boar, creating tangles from unraveled targets is very easy and happens quite frequently. And if you want even more tangles on the field, because why not, it's free damage and Whirling Maelstrom is just cool, then you can use Thread of Transmutation. So Strand kills while Woven Mail is active will generate Tangle. Woven Mail is of course a huge buff for any Strand build to help keep you alive. It's massive damage reduction, and because of Thread of Warding, Woven Mail is also very easy to have, since we're already leaning into orb pickups for this build with Star Eater Scales, Strand Siphons, and our primary, which I'll talk about in a minute. So now you not only have Woven Mail, but you'll be creating more tangles and dealing more damage because of it. Still have a couple more layers for survivability at this point. I'm sure just about every Strand build out there has you taking advantage of Woven Mail, but we can also seamlessly loop in some extra healing with Woven Mail as well. I understand people want to use Surge mods and get the most damage that they can, but by using the Better Already and Recuperation mods, you can not only gain Woven Mail by picking up an Orb of Power, but also regain some health and start your shield regen as well. On their own, these mods aren't typically amazing. All these stacked together are very powerful and help keep you alive way more than if you just used Woven Mail. Onslaught is very chaotic, and sometimes you just need a way to force your health regen. There's just too much shooting at you a lot of the times to count on your normal recovery stat to clutch up for you. So these two leg mods, in addition to Woven Mail boosting your resistance, is really huge. And don't forget, this loops nicely back into our first goal. These orbs are going to be feeding extra damage and energy into your super because of Star Eater Scales. And also, you're going to be getting unraveling rounds for Tusk of the Boar for ridiculous ad clear now. So I think you can probably see just how beneficial it is to be slotting these orb mods on. You're generating a lot of them, so are your teammates, and getting the most out of them just kind of feels like an obvious thing to do. On top of that, something I like to do is just use Powerful Attraction on your cloak, so you can just pick them all up at once with a quick dodge. It's very helpful in a pinch when your health is low. Sometimes there are orbs that you don't see, and by using Powerful Attraction, your dodge is going to pick them up from a distance and heal you, which just feels fantastic when it saves your life. We're still not done though, actually. I feel like this might be a little controversial of a choice. I don't know. Maybe you could get more use out of a different aspect, but for this build, I'm leaning hard into the survivability and using Threaded Spectre. Threaded Spectre drops a Strand decoy that'll distract enemies for a time, a lot like the decoys that you can purchase in Onslaught. Now you gotta understand, they're not tanky like Shax is, but the Strand decoys can really help you escape if you find yourself in a bad spot or just need to draw off some of the heat. Even if it's just 3-4 seconds, that can be a lifesaver. I've been pleasantly surprised by Threaded Spectre, and I think think you might be too if you tried it. It's just another layer that'll help you survive an Onslaught or help you grab a tough res, draw some heat while you capture a spike mine. For most of my time playing Strand Hunter, I've kind of overlooked it, but it is actually a pretty handy tool. And the last point I want to hit on for survivability, and maybe I shouldn't let off with this, is just run 100 resilience. There's almost no good reason not to, and it hurts me to say as a hunter because I really like mobility, I like leaning into other stats, but resilience is absolutely critical in Onslaught. Stuff kills you really fast anyways, and having your base resistance as high as it can be is really important. I really think with all the healing and the resistance from Woven Mail on orb pickup combined with 100 resilience would be really helpful for you if you find yourself under the boot of a demolitionist frequently. So at this point we've gone over the damage options for the build, we've gone over survivability, and at this point I'm sure you're wondering what in the world I'm using for weapons, because obviously that's a big part of the damage. Of course we've talked about Tusk of the Boar as your grenade launcher, and it's the only weapon I'd say is really mandatory, really core to the build. It's an important part of the build, clearing ads, spreading insane amounts of unraveling and threadlings. It's really fun, it's quite an experience, and definitely something I want you guys to try. And quick thing about Tusk of the Boar, if you're bummed out about having to play Iron Banner next time it's here, just remember, if you don't have it yet, Bungie buffed the drop rate for you guys. And then once it drops from either decoding engrams or endgame rewards, you can then focus those engrams for Tusk drops for pretty cheap. As for the energy slot and power weapon, you can be flexible with these, and I've really enjoyed trying a number of different things. For this season, the artifact mods are very powerful, allowing for easy radiance, ignitions, and scorching even if you're not playing on a solar subclass. So because of that, even though I'm using Strand, and I'm using a Strand special weapon, I'm usually putting on solar weapons to take advantage of that for my energy and heavy slot. For my energy weapon, I've been using Parabellum, which is an adaptive solar world drop SMG, so unfortunately it's kind of rare. I talked about this gun in a recent video discussing great build weapons, but basically attrition orbs on this thing is nuts. Attrition orbs generates orbs of power when you land about 67% of a magazine. On other weapons that's kind of underwhelming, but on SMGs you can absolutely burn through that magazine and generate orbs very quickly. And that's not even all. Attrition orbs works with rewind rounds as well, and if you have something meaty like a champion in front of you or one of those big shanks, you can generate 2 orbs in a single magazine. The kind of nice thing about that is it can be across magazine. That 67% of the magazine counter kind of applies across magazine, so if you land a bunch of shots that don't get an orb but then reload, odds are you're going to spawn one very quickly into that next magazine. It's kind of handy. Now in most cases it's like, yeah, whatever. I mean, you generate a tiny orb, you get almost no super back, whatever. It's literally 0.8% of your super. But we just spent the last 5 minutes of this build talking about orbs. They're going to heal you, they're going to restore your shields, grant Woven Mail, unraveling rounds, 4 very strong benefits just for picking up an orb of power, and Parabellum will crank them out. And since you're running Star Eater scales, the super regen isn't negligible either. Those little orbs actually do add up. So that's a big reason I like attrition orbs. And if you don't have a Parabellum to run it on, you've got a couple other options like Subjunctive from Season of the Wish, Multi-Mock from Iron Banner, or Ross Arago, the Void World Drop Auto Rifle. Typically I don't like attrition orbs, but it's very good on SMGs because of how fast they burn through the magazine. And Parabellum being a solar weapon and taking advantage of all the solar synergy in the artifact while also feeding into your Strand build with all the orbs is incredible. Now if you want to use your exotic in the energy slot, you could also try running Sunshot. That's really nice. It has that innate 40% exotic damage buff to minor enemies, which is very handy. It's very good for ad clear. You can also use Vex Mythoclast for a little more overall utility with the linear fusion mode. That can definitely be handy when you need just a little bit of extra precision damage and range. Now for heavy, I'd really recommend going with whatever is the overcharge mod for that week, which just boosts your damage. Every week it rotates. This week it's machine guns. Maybe it's different by the time you watch this. Point is, you can fit whatever you enjoy here. Because of the artifact and all the solar mods, I would still probably run a solar heavy. Dragon's Breath has served me very well. Just kind of fire and forget massive damage. You just want to make sure your other teammates aren't also using it, since that kind of reduces your ignition damage. Gallowhorn is also very effective, still very strong against champs, great for clearing out large groups quickly. And occasionally, if I knew a Tormentor was going to be coming soon, if we hadn't had one for a while, I'd switch to Whisper of the Worm or Sleeper Simulant. That precision damage is really strong, can be really helpful against later wave bosses where you gotta keep your distance too. For legendaries, the Trials Machine Gun Unwavering Duty is really good. Killing Tally is really good on that thing. You've also got Briar's Contempt or Cataclysmic, both solar linears, both are going to do alright against Tormentors, although they're not very good against Briggs, which is definitely a problem. Again, it's kind of up to preference, it's up to what you struggle with. That's something I wanted to be a part of this build, because Onslaught's modifiers change. There's 3 different maps, there's different engagement ranges. It has a variety of enemies and encounters, and you need different weapons at different moments. So when I was making this build, I wanted to make sure that other aspects of the build were strong enough so that you can use whatever you need to for heavy, including an exotic if you have to. It deals great damage both single target and ad clear by taking advantage of Star Eater scales and really strong artifact synergy when combined with a great weapon like Tusk of the Boar. It's got excellent survivability by taking advantage of every orb we pick up to restore health, shields, grant Transwoven Mail, and even Feast of Light ×4 is going to grant an overshield when you pop your super. I never mentioned that, but that's really handy too. And it's a pretty strong overshield too. It's a great way to get out of a pinch. Then we've got solid versatility with our weapons. You can either use your weapons like Parabellum to support the build even more and use free Radiant and Ignitions from the artifact, or opt for more healing with weapons like Abyss Defiant with Heal Clip. And then Heavy is interchangeable for either strong damage like Galahorn, or high precision damage to deal with Tormentors with Whisper or Sleeper Simulant, or any linear fusion that you like. Again, first thing in the description is going to be the dim link, so feel free to check that out if you want to slap it on and try it. And at the very least, if you try nothing else, just try Tusk of the Boar with Horde Shuttle and Unraveling Orbs. Just those three elements alone are incredibly strong, and you don't even have to play on Strand to use that either. I've been using Tusk for my Void builds lately as well, and that works just fine. Leave your favorite builds down in the comments, and of course, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Destiny videos here on YouTube, and feel free to follow me on Twitch if you want to catch me on Saturday nights. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.